My name is Brad Martin, and I'm here with my colleague Emily Pisano. We're from FPWA. FPWA is an anti-poverty policy organization. Today we're going to be having our session Beyond Numbers, where we are going to show you a tool that we've made using open data, the NYC Funds Tracker. It's an interactive dashboard where we've taken budget data and tried to make it so that, everyone in New York and our member organizations can use it to understand the city's budget. So what we'll cover today, first I'll talk a little bit more about who we are and why we think this work is important. Then we'll show you the NYC Funds Tracker itself. And then at the end, we'll have a little session where you can hopefully use the tracker yourself. So for that section at the end, if you do have a laptop, feel free to get it out because you will be able to follow along and use the tracker. You can use it on your phone as well, but it's really optimally designed to be used on a computer.
And just the way that you can access it, we'll post later on in the presentation. So just get out your laptops or whatever device you're using.
Okay, so first I'll just give a bit of a background about who we are and our work and the NYC Funds Tracker. So as I mentioned, we're an anti-poverty policy organization. We're also a member organization, so we have about 150 members, which are mainly human services organizations. It includes faith-based organizations and non-faith-based, but all really organizations that are focused on helping the New York City community. Our organization also has a policy team, of which Emily and I are fiscal policy analysts. So we're really concerned with the budget, primarily the city and state budget, looking at the budget, trying to work out how it impacts New Yorkers with low incomes, our member organizations, and really trying to advocate for budgets that meet the needs of New Yorkers with low incomes. Now, during our budget work, what we've found is that our members don't necessarily have a good understanding of the city budget. A lot of the information is hidden away in PDF documents that's really hard to understand. And so what we've decided to do is make this dashboard, the NYC Funds Tracker. We think that by having more transparent budget information, we can empower more people to know what's happening with the city, where the city's money comes from, and where the city's money is going. And then with that information, advocates can be informed to be involved in the budget process.
Oh, this is funny. It's the embedded thing doesn't work. Oh, that was a tweet from Joe Biden.
Easy picture that. And it was really what this slide is about, is just like why the budget is important. So a budget is a reflection of the government's values and what they care about. So it impacts all of us. And as an organization, we are trying to make sure that it meets the needs of our communities. This advocacy is relevant now in the city because the city budget process is happening. The mayor has released a preliminary budget, and now the city council is going through negotiations with the mayor to develop the executive budget. And budget hearings are underway as well. This year, there's also an extra layer of why this information is important. So the NYC Funds Tracker looks at where the city gets its money from. The city gets money by generating its own revenue through things like taxes. It also receives state and federal grants. About 10% of the city's budget, which is about $11 billion, comes from the federal government. And if you've seen anything in the news, you can understand that a lot of this funding is now at risk. There's already been some funding that's being clawed back. So we think it's important that people understand the state of federal funding now, so that we know how much is on the line, and that can understand what different funding streams could be at risk. So to try and make sure we're all informed, we made the NYC Funds Tracker. This is a tool that sort of reflects quite a long background of work that FPWA has been doing looking at funding. And we've just updated it this year, releasing it last week.
Sorry.
So sort of as I touched on, the Funds Tracker allows you to explore the city's revenue, so where the city's money comes from, and then expenditure, so how the city allocates that money through the budget process. Compared to previous years of this work that we've done, We previously only included certain agencies in the funds tracker. Now we've expanded it so that every single city agency is in there. So that's like about 140 city agencies, and really quite down to like a detail. You say if there's like down to the community board level, you can jump into the funds tracker and like find out about that fund. So just like a quick background on where the data is from. So we take open data that's released by the Comptroller's Office through Checkbook NYC and the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. One note about the data is that it looks at the actual operating budget of the city. So it's it doesn't look into the future. What it's used is to give you a snapshot of like the current real state of funding. We do some work to merge and clean and validate the data. We adjust for inflation, which we'll show you in the tool. And then we use Tableau to create the dashboard. If you're interested in like the underlying data that we have a GitHub that you can go on and access that in case you want to do your own analysis with the data as well. So yeah, just to recap, like why we think this is important for advocates, it allows us to understand the budget, explore trends going back to 2011. So we can explore how funding has changed over time. And then we can use this information to advocate for a budget that meets our needs. So I'll hand over to Emily now, who's going to give a bit of a demo of the tracker and step through some of the different things that we have in there.
Thank you, Brad. I'm going to be sitting over here because I'm going to be going through a demo. If you can't hear me at any time, just let me know and I'll speak up. By the way, what I want to talk about is practically what are the use cases for the New York City Funds Tracker and how can we use it to learn more about the budget in a way. I think the audience here today probably has a lot of experience with data, but we wanted to provide a tool that in case you didn't want to extract all this data and go through a kind of laborious process of cleaning, validating, that you could access this data more readily. So whoever has their laptops or their phones ready, you can visit this link on your computer. You can also find it just by searching in Google New York City Funds Tracker, and it should be one of the top links. That page will bring you to our fiscal policy corner where we have a lot of other updates about the budget and resources, and you just click in that website, visit the New York City Funds Tracker, and it will bring you here. So just going to go through a demo of what's actually here together. And just as a forewarning, we've used this tool. We created it with Tableau, which is a really great user-friendly tool. There's actually a lot of data in the back end here. So we have millions and millions of lines of data. And so it actually works pretty well clicking through, but there's a couple screens that you got to give it 15 seconds to load. So I understand here that it might be, hopefully everyone can see it. It's much better to view on your laptop. We try to pack as much data as possible. So if you have to squint, don't try to read everything. It's better on your laptop. Great. So a demo of what is here and how you can navigate the funds tracker. Essentially what the tracker intends to do is give you an overview of the city's revenue and its expenditure over a period of 13 years. When you come to the funds tracker, you're going to come to an overview page, which gives you a snapshot of revenue and expenditure at a high level. Each page will have a section about section. So if you get lost, you can read what's there. And just highlighting throughout, we'll be using this control section, which is on the left-hand bar, to navigate and manipulate the data for different things. So how we've set up the funds tracker is to look at inflation-adjusted spending. And that's because we think that, especially given the moment that we find ourselves in, we want to understand the real access to funding that New York City has. And it's particularly important, and I'll get into why that's important for the federal funding conversation. So on this homepage here, you can see the revenue in blue, expenditure in orange, and you can notice an interesting trend that when adjusted for inflation, the city's budget power has actually decreased in the last 2 years. So this brings us up to FY24, which is the last complete fiscal year. Also here, you'll see access to these graphs, which give you an overview of where the city's revenue comes from, splitting out by city, federal, and state. And you'll also see a graph on a expenditure. And what we've tried to do throughout all these views is highlight how the city spends money on human services. As Brad alluded to before, we're an anti-poverty organization and we support members that are primarily in the human services sector. This is a budget area that it's a huge budget area. It's very important, but it often gets overlooked when we start to talk about revenue. And so this is why we wanted our focus to be on human services. You'll find a navigation bar on in the top banner, and it'll allow you to explore do deeper dives into this data. So we have information on the revenue, which is we've denoted with blue, and expenditure in orange. So I'm just going to click into revenue, say we wanted to understand more about that revenue graph that we saw, seeing how it splits out between city, state, and federal. So we can see how this has changed over time. We can adjust date ranges here. So if you wanted to quickly pull this information, it's right there. Say you wanted to just look at federal funding, you can see that here. And you can see the giant growth during COVID and a drop off. Again, adjust for inflation or non-inflation. But say you wanted to explore this big block. Okay, what is contained in this big block of revenue that the city collects? You can use this function here to dive a little bit deeper. So we have 3 different views. What you can see here is this is revenue with all the different city funding sources. So the city collects a majority of its revenue with taxes, and you can see automatic calculations here. So to make it easier to get quick insights from this data. So what this says here is that taxes are in the last full fiscal year, 2024, that were when adjusted for inflation, or $74 billion, making up around almost 66% of the budget. That's a decrease, again, when adjusted for inflation of just a decrease of about 2%, but it's increased since the year last, the date range, 16%. So you can get a kind of understanding of the trends. And again, if we wanted to dive in even deeper, because taxes is a big category, we can pull in this information and we can say break down taxes. And so it looks like a crazy kind of graph, which is why we wanted this to be discoverable and not to hit you all in the face. But you can see here how taxes are broken down. We still include the information with state and federal grants and other city revenue sources, but this just allows for that full breakdown. So you can see here, real estate taxes are the largest source of revenue for New York City's. Okay, but still our question that we find ourselves in today is really about the federal budget. So we've provided a way to dive a bit deeper into that data, and that can be found on the grants page. So this is the page that behind this, there are many rows of data. So if I have to refresh, that might be something. So what we looked at here, and apologies, we're going through this just to show the functionality, but though it's going to be a portion where we can kind of explore this together. Or we're highlighting grants to human services. But really, this is how we've set it up to be set. But you can understand, you can break this down by every single agency in the city. There are some limitations. We don't have NYCHA. That's because it's recorded differently in the budget. But primarily, if you're interested in a New York City agency, you can find it here and understand what grants are coming. So the blue line and blue denotes federal, and this light blue is state. So here you can actually see how reliant the city agency was on federal grants for that last fiscal year. So we can see how human services, huge portions of their budget are directly reliant on federal grants and state grants, which are impacted by the federal funding as well. If you wanted to, again, this data is discoverable, so you kind of have to click around and find things yourself. We have a lot of data it's going to look. And so if you wanted to dive even deeper and say, okay, what grants are they actually receiving? We can see this crazy graph. This is not every grant in the city by far, but this is just for human services. And I don't think you can really even understand what's going on in this bottom portion. But we have a grant selection bar that you can search for grants that you're interested in. You can filter for agency. You can remove federal or state data if you just want to look at one. And you can really see some top line information. Say you wanted to understand which agencies receive the Child Care and Development Block Grant. We can see here, it like highlights that line. And it shows that breakdown by agency. So this is interesting. This is just a tool that we created to do our own work, to be honest. And we hope somebody else wants to use it too. But we find it really useful because it's a mess trying to track down every single agency and how it changes over time and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, this is personally my favorite screen, but we're going to move on. So, of course, we want to know where the city gets its money from. But as advocates, usually what we care about is where the city's budget goes, right? We think those things are deeply connected, but we want to explore where the city's budget goes. We can use these expenditure tabs. So this is something here that you can see how the city's budget breaks down in about 10 categories. These are categories that are made by the comptroller's office. That's what we've used. But you can see spending on education. You can see spending on social services, spending on public safety, the police. And you can select and deselect these things to move the graph. So I won't go through it now, but say you wanted to make a comparison between, say, the amount of money that we spend on libraries, which is 0.41% of the city's budget, and the amount that we spend on another category, the public safety. You can pull that graph really easily. So we like that function. But of course, this in the aggregate is really not how the city's budget works. It kind of gets nitty gritty. So we need to understand these general trends, but want to be able to dive into agency information. And so again, this is set to be on the human services agencies that we're focused on, but you can reselect more and you can see how funding to these different agencies have changed over time. So you can see right here, Department of Social Services has a huge budget. It's $12 billion in 2024. Again, it's down since we have it set for 2014, down 2% when adjusted for inflation. And again, there's more here. And we can see actually what each agency is spending its money on. These are big categories. This is all open data, so we'd love to provide more data. Sometimes you can't find a certain program that exists. It's sometimes hidden in these line items, but at least we can have this is good data. So it's not perfect, but it's good. So what you can see here, this is just set to see the top spending items we've selected it to default to the top spending items for human services. So this is Medicaid, we have full year positions, but we could say, select this. Hopefully it's not temperamental. But if we wanted to understand ACS, say, this is an agency that's highly reliant on federal grants, as you've seen in the previous screen. They're spending for how it's changed over time. And you can see this huge kind of changes in spending. I want to emphasize that the data that we have in the tracker is what's actually spent and not what's budgeted for. And so there can be incongruencies between those. So this is the fun overview of the tracker. There's even more here, but I won't annoy you guys anymore. But I wanted to kind of do a demo and see if you guys can find the information that we hope you can use. So what kind of questions can we ask the tracker? in the broad sense, but just a recap, we can ask the tracker, what did the city spend its budget on and how did those compare to different years, to different priorities, etc. So this is a kind of like, if you wanted to understand what's in each of these tabs, I won't read it out, but it's here. So I'm gonna try to do, we have a little incentive to participate. I think Brad has some Kit Kat Mars. If you are allergic to chocolate, we will make this up in kind, but yeah. Want to ask a few questions. Sorry. Hi.
Resolution A, I don't know if it's going to be listed there.
Yeah.
Resolution A from the council.
Sorry?
Resolution A.
I'm not familiar with that council initiative, so can you expand more on that?
Yes, it's an initiative to solve HPD, for example. Yeah.
I think it's discretionary funds.
Yeah.
Oh, discretionary funds. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, discretionary funds should be listed there. I would encourage you to, again, we're discovering this data, and so we might not have a deep dive onto every single piece, but when people flag kind of items that they're interested in, we do our research into them. So discretionary funding should be there, but you can, if you have your laptop, I'd encourage you to go look for it. It might be under a different name, so instead of counts, you kind of have to get creative sometimes.
Yeah, it should have all funding that's in the city's operating budget.
Yeah. So
Right? That's in the operating budget.
Yeah.
Be accounted for somewhere.
okay, so can anyone find, if they have it open, what was the overall revenue of New York City in FY24?
104.8 billion.
Yeah. Nice.
Let's see what's right.
Yeah. Oh no. Oh. We're gonna show you how she got there. Are we? Yes. So multiple ways. It's right here. We can see it on oh wait, I'm sorry. Actually, that's not true. No, I mean, you still get a Kit Kat. So the revenue of the city was $112.8 billion. We have a really interesting anomaly where the city spent more money than it had in FY24. So it's $113 billion. But we love it. There's also, you can see it in the expenditure. Yeah, that's the best way to find it.
How much of NYC's revenue came from federal grants in FY24?
We can go through it together.
11 billion.
That is correct.
How we do this? So there's a few different ways you can see that. You can see it on the overview page here. It's probably the easiest way. Cool. Or here as well.
It's really tiny on the screen. I'm so sorry, guys. Okay, which human services agency received the most in federal grants in FY24? And this is a little bit of a trick question, so we'll flag that.
This is guess. HRA, DSS, DHS, but probably a lot of it was DHS, right?
We have, it's DSS.
Oh, DSS.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But
They're combined. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We have it at the combined level. Yeah. So thank you.
What was DSS's annual budget in FY24?
Yes.
12 billion.
Sounds right.
That include HRA and ESA and DHS or just
It's DSS is combined.
It's DSS and HRA.
and DSS also.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, DHS is separate.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I misheard you.
It's separate, but it's
Yeah.
under
The budget is separate.
Yeah.
And then for DSS, HRA, their budgets together. So
This is how the comptroller structures it in their annual report. So it might be, might be some functional differences.
here is combined DSS and HRA, but then DHS is separate. So what you would do if you want to see an individual
What's the last one?
grant is go to on the grants page. Then in the controls here, you can go individual grant chart. If there's an agency you're interested in, you can go Department of Social Services.
Oh.
And you can see this one here, which is the biggest, is TANF, or Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, which funds a lot of the cash assistance. So it's a really important grant for the city and for New Yorkers with low incomes. Yes.
Did you guys use also Power BI at all, or that does it work with this program that you?
We did consider using Power BI when making it. Decided on Tableau, but yeah, I don't know, interested in like hearing from people if they've used Power BI, if they think it's like how that compares to Tableau.
How long did it take you to build this?
Well, there's like multiple iterations of this. Last year, we actually did a presentation where it was just human services. And then the actual like process, it was a group process of deciding the design, deciding what gets in it. So I think if we said like from product to realization, I was like, 6 months, but that wasn't fully working on this.
But also shout out to Emily, who actually made all of this herself, really.
So we kind of, before we end off, that this is just a tool, and the tool is meant to facilitate advocacy. So that is our main focus. And really the data doesn't really mean anything unless people are talking about it and people understand what everything means. So it's really helpful, but it's only the first step. And so we wanted to build off of the last question, talking about what is the largest grant that DSS received, and the largest grant that supports human services, really. And so taking a little bit just to leave you off with what the material kind of takeaways that you can find from the Funds Tracker are, you can discover a lot of good data points that help you build a history about policy. So what does TAMF support if you're not familiar? TAMF is a federal block grant that is the largest benefit program for families. It funds a wide variety of programs, including cash assistance, which is its largest portion, childcare, pre-K, some refundable tax credits focused on families, some non-recurring benefits, child welfare services, and program management. This is just a selection. And you can see some pretty dramatic trends going on. If we took that peak point, that's in 2008, and this is adjusted for inflation, TAMF has decreased in the amount of actual, so this is not budgeted amount, the actual TAMF amount that the city is receiving has decreased almost 40% since pre-pandemic. So looking at what has actually changed and how we can use these kind of graphs to build policy stories, we can see where we have to contextualize this information with a lot of different factors. Thinking about, okay, the first year is 2011. We're coming out of the 2008 financial crisis. There's actually some other programs that are helping people receive benefits. So it reduces, we're starting at a like kind of lower level of what people are actually using TAMF because they're accessing other assistance. But we see kind of peaks and troughs here. 2012, you start to see a bit of an increase in how much TAMF funding is increased. So that is partially because there's all these stories of policy changes being made, formula changes being made, and demand. So in 2012, we see TAMF being expanded for housing purposes, for use for housing. In 2018, New York State increased its amount spending on childcare. So they made that possible to increase and have different programs where TAMF is spent there, supporting a lot of those, the whole childcare agenda that was going on. 2020, we see there's a COVID restructuring. We see TAMF reserves being used as rainy day funds. And so that means like the city, what they squirrel away. And we see that there's some emergency funds access that are reducing the actual need for TAMF. And we see TAMP just being consistently under attack. There was a formula change again in 2021. You see that red dot point. And since then, there's been a number of different factors influencing the amount of actual TAMP dollars. So there's inflation. TAMP dollars, cash assistance, are not adjusted for inflation. They haven't changed. The amount of money that the state and city receives has not changed since like 40 years, 30 years. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. We see use of other benefits. We see administrative issues with actually accessing the funds. People that apply for cash assistance, they have to wait an average 6 months to receive them. And we also see at the same time increased demand. So we see that kind of picking up in 2023 and 2022 and 2023. So it's a really complex story that can't be captured by a simple visualization, but it's a way for us to kind of build better understanding in a very complex environment. And what does understanding these trends, what does it do for us from an advocacy perspective? So we can kind of have some big buckets of understanding of how policy choices have affected families. We see funding freezes, we see employee terminations, so or employee vacancies, lack of gutting of administration, and new conditions on grant funding. These are things that have affected TAMP in the past, and now they're under full assault by the current federal administration. They're using every single one of these tools to hit the city and the state's budget, right? So what can we do about it? How can this play a role in the conversations that we need to be having? We need to use our voices to articulate what funding means and what funding does for us. And so we touched on things that we care about at FPWA, but there's a lot of data in the funds tracker that might be more relevant to you, whether you're an advocate or you're as just a New York City caring citizen. So you can access information, say, on community boards. You can access information on a specific program that you want to see. And so we want you to use New York City Funds Tracker, but also use your voice more generally. Call for leadership in New York to stand up for these programs and just supporting human services and public servants that are administering these programs and fighting for funding. So just to leave off everyone, we know that the funds tracker we think that it's a great tool, but we know that it can be a little bit overwhelming. So you can access it. We continue to ask you to explore it, but we actually have office hours that we hold on a weekly basis, and that you can ask us questions about the New York City Funds Tracker, or you can come to us with a question about the New York City budget. We provide updates on the New York City budget, that the ongoing negotiations on our website, and we might not be able to answer your question off the bat. We might as well, but at least we can start a conversation about hearing what people care about, what funding that we need, and use our voices as to advocate for them. So encourage everyone to check it out. Thank you for your time. Can pass out a few more Kit Kats. We have a lot.
Any questions?
Yeah, any questions?
What are the underlying data sets for this? Are all from open data, or does it include and does it also include this data from the city council budget reports, or is this from individual agencies?
So we've done all this. The data comes from Checkbook NYC, which is the comptroller's website for the budget. But we've actually paired this data with data from the comptroller's office that actually isn't available or hidden on Checkbook website, just because there's some accounting differences in how you get to the final end sums. So we had to combine those data to report things that are reported, say, in a budgetary manner. On the city council, we don't have that in the funds tracker. What we do have is the New York City Budget Watch, which we publish after each round of negotiations and analyze what was in the budget and what wasn't. So it's a tool this one's backward looking. We do have more data on what's ongoing.
How old is this? This is 6 months. So
Well, we just released it recently, but yes.
do you have a lifetime management plan for this? Because if it goes away in 6 months or so years,
Why say people? Just curious.
This project of kind of tracking funds is held by our organization. So FPWA has a vested interest in maintaining this. They started doing it in about 2019. This is a complete overhaul, but what we want this to do is we have a lot of back-end documents. It's plug and play now to update it. That's the goal, is to keep it alive. Hopefully budget data doesn't go away. I don't know.
What were the pros and cons of Power BI versus?
I'm trying to remember because the first version of this we made a year ago, and we had a document where we did have the pros and cons. I can probably pull it up and I'll see.
I think it was like a choice by somebody that knew how to use Tableau. I don't know.
The reason I put some thought into it. I remember what. Sorry. We can do another question.
Did you guys look into the distribution of the production of tax revenue by New York City and the distribution of that tax revenue across suburbs, different states, and outside of New York City in general?
No, that's very hard to account for, but I'd recommend actually a little bit different. So no, we haven't done that. That's an interesting question. I was going to recommend a resource by the comptroller's office itself. There's a city resource, but it speaks to a little bit of a different concern. So there's a resource that tries to, on the comptroller's website, that accounts not for how city funds are flowing elsewhere, but how the total federal funds that the city receives, because we only have operating budget. But if you want to think about like direct benefits or other tax things, that's there. They're also doing a lot of good work. So you might be able to find something there.
I don't know if you addressed this earlier, but curious how FPWA has utilized the New York City Fund Tracker to advance its own agenda or its own goals.
Yeah, actually, that was the original presentation for today, and it was too complicated. So actually, yeah, the way that we've used this for advocacy. So for example, one of our colleagues, one of their priorities is maintaining funding for the Commission on Human Rights, because we believe that funding really doesn't matter, creating programs, it doesn't matter unless they're enforced. So what we can see in the New York City Funds Tracker is really interesting, actually, is that I won't pull it up now, but basically how expenditure to the agency has changed since COVID. There's been almost a 30% drop in the funding that's received. And that's because there's not, what you'll see is a big drop off in the amount of full-time positions. And basically what it's pointing to is that there's a lot of vacancies at CCHR that have not been filled. And so that's a risk for us here today in New York City, especially given the current environment. And huge, if you adjust for inflation, in 2019, it would be 16 million, still relatively small if you think about it. And today would be around 11 million.
How do your member agencies, your members, make use of the tool? How do you socialize it?
So we had an event recently that we spoke to members about this. We've done presentations for member agencies to try to get them to try to understand how they can find their priorities. This is actually how we decided to expand the tracker, because last year we didn't have as much granular information. We just had the high level information because it was learn about the budget, but people want to know about the programs that they care about. So that's why we have this data here today. If the people that would like to be connected with us or you think would benefit from this, again, like, we'd love to hear from them and do more.
I found that when we were deciding about it. So originally we were going to just be using like free versions, and we liked the functionality of Tableau Public for that purpose. Since then, we've actually now using a paid version of Tableau as our data set has gotten bigger. And then otherwise it was just, we thought more visually appealing in Tableau.
Do we have any other questions?
This is the nuts and bolts question, but so you were saying that for updating the visualizations, you have like back-end documents, and so it's like plug and play. So does that include like the data cleaning part of it? You just have like code that cleans it, and the data that you use from the comptroller is like consistently formatted enough that you don't have to update or make a lot of changes. And Tableau doesn't have that functionality, right? Or is it R? Or...
Tableau has some functionality. We decide to use R. We have code that automatically runs the extraction from the API and the cleaning of the data that then can be put into Funds Tracker. It should be noted though that there's actually like the highest level data, that just thinking about what each agency receives, that comes from a Excel document that the comptroller puts out. We had to do some cleaning there, comparing it against PDF documents. So we've done that back. So that was manual. That exists theoretically now, so that there is one manual thing where we'd have to update that portion, but it should just be for 1 year.
Relating to the earlier question about future maintenance, have you had any discussions or plans to like open source your code or any of that underlying?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. It's on, so we have on GitHub the cleaned data sources, but we can look into uploading the code as well for that. The initial Funds Tracker, the person that did some of the base work here, she made an API call that allowed for, there's a lot of data sets, so it does that call automatically without having to come back, and there's like limits on how many rows of that you can extract. So this code allows you to just run it at once. So we can share that. All right. Thank you.
That is all.
all.